Here is a story from Sumer. This story is about the mighty goddess Ereshkigal and the rude young god. Never before had such an enormous banquet been planned. All the deities of the Anunnaki were invited, of course, as they were the ones making the arrangements. But even the lesser deities of the Igigi were asked to attend. Only the best food and drink would be served. Sweet-smelling fruits would be placed beside baskets of tasty fish and heaping platters of roasted goat. All this accompanied by freshly made kibbutz bread, barley beer, and wine from dates and grapes. Surely this divine feast would be remembered for a long time to come. But not everyone was occupied with these festive preparations. Some had much too much work to do. These people lived in a dark place, far below the heavenly clouds and even below the earth. They lived in a sacred land called Ereshkigal, better known as the land of the dead, or the land of no return. At first, these names might sound a bit scary, but in those days, death was just as important as life. When someone died, they would leave the world of the living in order to join the kind and merciful protection of the goddess Ereshkigal. And there was Belit Seri, the scribe who kept the holy records. When newcomers came, it was her job to write down all the good and bad actions that the person had done during their life on earth. After that, they would pass before the trustworthy Nungal, Ereshkigal's daughter, who would carefully judge the purity of their souls. All three deities worked hard day and night, receiving new guests. They had little time left over for travel or festivities. So when Kika, the messenger of the Anunnaki, arrived, his presence was barely noticed. He had come all the way down from heaven, had passed by the bustling activities on earth, had made his way through the 7 gates of Ereshkigal, and finally found his way to the chambers of the mighty goddess Ereshkigal. Standing in awe before the queen of the underworld, he managed to stammer out his important message. "The deities of the Anunnaki would be honored to have your presence at their upcoming banquet." "I am afraid I must refuse this tempting invitation," she sighed. "Please send my apologies to the Anunnaki gods. But I cannot possibly leave my duties. Chaos would creep into Ereshkigal if I should leave for even a day. I will, however, send my faithful assistant Namtar in my place. He will represent me during the festivities and bring back my part of the delicious food and drink." And true to her word, on the morning of the great feast, Namtar was sent off to carry out his important mission. One by one, he nervously climbed the little steps to Heaven's Gate. Would the gods be disappointed, he wondered? After all, he was only Ereshkigal's assistant. But much to his surprise, each deity stood and bowed low upon his arrival. For who in Anunnaki, for who in the Igigi, was not humbled in the presence of even a lowly messenger of the mighty mistress of the dead? Everyone treated Namtar with respect and reverence, that is, all except one. He was a young god, a warrior god, a god that took great joy in spreading deadly disease and creating destructive turbulence and storms. It was Nergal, who would not stand. It was Nergal who would not bow down. All those around him looked horrified at the young god's rudeness. They shouted at him and called him names. But there was nothing to be done. He just stood there defiantly. Upon Namtar's return to Irkalla, the story of Nergal was told. Can he be so young or so foolish that he is ignorant of my powers? Ereshkigal calmly replied. He shall see the land of the dead for himself. He shall know that I alone rule this mighty queendom. Namtar, bring him to me so that he may present his apologies. And so the faithful assistant returned to the heavens. Nergal, he called out, you must return with me to the land of the dead. My mistress demands an apology. No one raised a finger to help the rude young god, or so they thought. But in fact, a deity named Ea, a secret enemy of Ereshkigal, quietly pulled Nergal aside. He whispered some wise advice in his ear. Of course you must go, but refuse any bread that might be offered. Refuse any meat that might be given. Refuse any drink that might be served. But most importantly, you must refuse to sleep beside the enchanting goddess. For if you accept any of these offers, you may be forced to stay in Irkalla forever. Now all of this was very good advice, but when Nergal finally arrived in the land of the dead and stood before the great queen Ereshkigal, all warnings flew from his mind. Overwhelmed by her presence, the young god fell to his knees and kissed the ground before her. Was there anyone whose strength was as mighty or who possessed greater wisdom? Was there anyone who could understand life as well as death better than she? As great as the goddess was, she was also a bit lonely. Seeing the handsome young god bowing before her, she also felt strong emotions. Come with me, she said, offering her hand. Forgetting all Ea's warnings, the awestruck youth allowed himself to be led like a lamb to her private rooms. 6 full nights did he spend with her without a thought of home. But on the 7th day, Nergal asked permission to return to heaven. Everyone must be worried about me, he explained. I would like to go back and assure them that I am well. I will come right back, he promised. Although the idea did not please her, Ereshkigal was kind and agreed to a short visit home. Upon his return to heaven, Nergal was once again taken aside by Ea. So, how did it go? I hope you followed all my recommendations. I must say that my life in the underworld was quite wonderful, Nergal boasted. I couldn't resist Ereshkigal's divine charms. But I'm not a prisoner. I've come back, haven't I? In fact, I just came back to tell you that I'm well. But afterwards I will return to her. What? Exclaimed Ea. You must be mad. Do you not fear for your other pleasures? The cunning Ea continued. You love making bloody wars and causing disease and disaster. Are you ready to give up all your powers? If you return to the goddess again, she will surely keep you there forever. These words brought Nergal back to his senses. Perhaps he shouldn't go back after all. He had managed to leave the first time, but would she ever let him leave again? Just at that moment, they heard Namtar, Ereshkigal's messenger, climbing heaven's steps for the third time. He had come to bring Nergal back to the land of no return. As Ea had predicted, the young god now belonged to the mistress of the dead. "It seems that you are obliged to go," whispered Ea. "Luckily, I have a plan." And till all hours of the night they secretly plotted. Nergal began carving a sword of magical woods, which would give him exceptional powers. Upon his arrival in Irkala, he was to present a false token and place 2 demon warriors at each of the 7 gates. When the next morning came, the young god obediently followed Namtar down the steps of heaven. He acted as if he had accepted his destiny, as if he were truly concerned about the goddess's loneliness. But behind Namtar's back, he gave his false tokens and positioned his guards at each gate. When he found himself once again in the presence of the magnificent goddess, he stumbled in confusion and began to have doubts. He wanted to be with her as before, but he didn't want to lose all his powers. What to do? If only he could have both, Queen Ereshkigal and the freedom to do all that he wished. He must steal her power. That was the answer. The inspired young god soon thought of a plan that was a perfect solution to his mixed desires. He thought of marriage. "Once married, I will be the master of the land of the Irkala." Now you might ask, why would a supreme goddess, one who did everything she could to help people, want to marry a god of bloody war, deadly disease, and destructive storms? Well, the answer is she didn't. But there was no alternative. She was surrounded on all sides by his warrior demons. His magically crafted sword blocked her escape. She had let down her defenses. She had been outwitted. "You will sit on the throne beside me as my beautiful wife, but the sacred tablets of destiny will be mine to control from now on." And so it was that after hundreds of years of lone and dedicated rule, the merciful mother of the dead, Ereshkigal, became second to the rude young god, Nergal.